the night before the Chicago shareholders' meeting. I placed a thin envelope in my pocket. The letter that would make my father laugh in front of 200 people. Then go silent. They thought 3 years of caregiving made me soft. They forgot the invisible ones learn quickly. Tomorrow, $85 million of inheritance will stop being a reward for favoritism. If you've ever been underestimated by family, follow me to the end. A clean, legal, unwitnessed turn. My name is Trinity Day. I am 32 years old. 4 years ago, I won the Burnham Prize for Emergent Design. My acceptance speech was about integrating therapeutic spaces into urban density. 3 years ago, I was finalizing the schematic design for a waterfront revitalization project, the kind of work I had aimed for since graduate school. Then, the call. Malcolm Day, my father, had a stroke, a major one, the kind that scrambles the circuits, leaving the titan of Chicago real estate staring at the ceiling, unable to sign his own name. My sister, Tessa, was in London, liaising with investors, which was her term for attending gallery openings in Mayfair. She sent a floral arrangement that cost more than a monthly mortgage payment and a text message. So awful. You're there, right? Handle it. I handled it. I put the waterfront project on indefinite hold. I traded my drafting table in the West Loop for the beige silence of the Neuro ICU at Northwestern. Day Urban Group. Doug. Even the name was blunt. Like my father. It was his legacy, built over 4 decades, specializing in high-end commercial real estate in Chicago. The portfolio was valued at roughly $85 million. Doug owned steel and glass, towers that reflected the lake, spaces where billion-dollar deals were signed. When Tessa finally returned 6 weeks later, she did not come to the rehab facility. She went straight to the office, wearing a severe black coat, announcing she was assuming interim operational control. She spoke about her international perspective. In reality, her experience was thin, mostly marketing for a boutique firm that eventually folded. But she looked the part. She always looked the part. For 3 years, I was the shadow system. While Tessa held meetings about rebranding and global synergies, I was the one at the kitchen table in our family's Edgewater home, sorting his mail. I learned to distinguish between junk bonds and critical municipal bonds. I read the board minutes. I saw the anxieties of the minority partners. When my father could speak again, his words were slurred, but his commands were clear. I became his translator, his proxy. I drafted emails he dictated, steadying his hand as he practiced his signature. I kept the schedules, interfacing with the board, ensuring payroll was met, placating contractors who were spooked by Tessa's new, aggressive payment terms. In their eyes, I was not running the business. I was logistics. I was the help. Harold Lyman, our family lawyer for 30 years, began preparing the generational transfer documents. Harold was a man who believed in mahogany desks and ironclad clauses. He started circulating drafts. He included a non-compete clause that was breathtaking in its severity. It was not just a restriction, it was an erasure. It stipulated that any affiliated Day family member was barred from engaging in any form of commercial or high-end residential real estate development within the state of Illinois for 10 years. It was designed to consolidate power around one person. The transfer was to be announced in 3 days, at the annual shareholders meeting. The night before the initial meeting, we had a family dinner, just the 4 of us, Dad, Tessa, Harold Lyman, and me. Tessa was radiant. She talked about a vision for digital integration in Doji properties. It sounded impressive if you did not know it was just a proposal to install larger touchscreens in the lobbies. And Trinity, Harold said, raising his glass, we must thank you for all your help, for holding down the fort at home. Yes, Trin, Tessa chimed in, patting my hand. It was wonderful having you around the house. We couldn't have managed the transition without you. I looked at my father. He had recovered maybe 70% of his function. The stroke left one side of his mouth slightly drawn, but his eyes were as sharp as they had ever been. He was watching me. Trinity, he said, the words slightly thick, You've done well, helping. I waited. He continued. Tessa has the killer instinct. She understands the business. He motioned toward me with his fork. You are suited for sketching. You always were. You do not have the stomach for the real work. It was not a judgment. It was a dismissal. He smiled. A small, tight movement. Sketches are nice, but they are not assets. That was when Harold Lyman slid a thin, cream-colored envelope across the table. It stopped by my plate. This is a gesture of appreciation. Trinity, Harold said, his voice smooth. From your father, a token for your time. I opened it. A check, $50,000. And the accompanying document, Harold continued, tapping a single folded page next to it. It was a legal waiver, a full and final relinquishment of all claims to the Day Urban Group, my inheritance, my stake in the family trust. I was to sign away my $85 million birthright for $50,000. Tessa needs a clean slate, my father said. No complications, no shareholder disputes. The meeting is in 3 days. Trinity, Harold said. His eyes were neutral. We need this signed before the announcement. The ultimatum was clear. Sign and disappear, or stay, refuse, and be the disgruntled, sketching daughter who tried to sabotage her sister's rightful ascension. Stay and be silent. I looked at the check, $50,000, the price of 3 years of my life, the price of my dream project. Tessa was watching me, a flicker of anxiety under her polished confidence. She expected a fight. She expected tears, shouting. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I folded the check, placed it back in the envelope with the waiver, and looked at my father. I will review it, I said. His smile widened. He thought I was weak. He thought I was beaten. Good girl. You were always the practical one. Later that night, in my old childhood bedroom, the one that still had my architectural drafts pinned to the corkboard, I did not cry. I opened my personal laptop, not the Doug-issued one I used for my father's correspondence, but my private machine. I logged into an email account they did not know existed, an account under a shell name, managed through a proxy. My inbox was not empty. There was an email, time-stamped 2 days prior. The sender was Evan Calder, CEO of Helix Biosystems. The subject line, Project Victory Notification, Helix Bio MedTech Campus. I opened it. Dear T. Day Studio, we are thrilled to inform you that your anonymous submission has been unanimously selected by the board for the new $45 million Helix Bio MedTech Campus. My heart was not pounding. It was heavy, a slow, cold drumbeat. For 2 years, while I was measuring my father's blood pressure, sitting in sterile waiting rooms, and enduring Tessa's condescending memos, I had been working. I had not stopped being an architect. I used the hours between midnight and 4 a.m. I took small freelance contracts under the radar. A facade redesign here, a zoning consultation there. I used that money to hire 2 young renderers in Argentina, managing them anonymously. I built a portfolio. When Helix Bio, a major player in biotechnology, issued a blind request for proposals for their new R&D campus, I entered. I was not Trinity Day, the caregiver. I was T. Day Studio. My design was not just steel and glass. It was centered on the human experience. I designed research labs integrated with therapeutic gardens. I designed light channels that minimized glare for recovering patients. I designed it based on the 3 years I had spent watching people try to heal in spaces that were never designed for them. They had not just liked my design. They had chosen it over submissions from the largest firms in the country, including, I knew, a preliminary, lackluster proposal from Day Urban Group. I looked at the $50,000 check on the nightstand. Then I looked at the $45 million contract notification on my screen. My father was right. I was suited for sketching. But there was the problem. Harold Lyman's non-compete. It was designed to stop me from doing exactly this. It was meant to bind me, the affiliated family member. But what if I was not one? The waiver, The document that disinherited me. If I signed it, I was no longer an heir. I was no longer affiliated. I was just Trinity Day, an independent architect who had been paid $50,000 for her time. Did the non-compete still apply to someone who had legally severed all financial ties before the contract was announced? This was not a question for Harold Lyman. I picked up my phone. It was past 10 p.m., but I knew she worked late. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp, awake, and carrying the faint hint of amusement she always had. Nora Keating. Nora Keating. In Chicago legal circles, they called her the Smiling Razor. She specialized in high-stakes corporate litigation and finding loopholes in ironclad contracts. Nora, I said, my voice steady. It is Trinity Day. I have a situation. It involves a $45 million contract and a $50,000 buyout. There was a pause. I could hear the smile in her voice. Well, this sounds much more interesting than my current brief. Meet me in 1 hour. My office. Nora Keating's office was on the 47th floor. A minimalist expanse of glass and white marble that overlooked Millennium Park. It was designed to communicate, very clearly, that she had nothing to hide and that her time was extremely expensive. She was the Smiling Razor, the one corporations hired when they needed to perform surgical excisions of problematic contracts. She poured 2 glasses of water, the ice cracking loudly in the silence, and gestured to the documents I had placed on her desk. Harold Lyman's generational transfer draft and my father's $50,000 buyout waiver. $50,000 for $85 million, she said, her voice dry. It is a spectacular insult. They are either profoundly stupid, or they believe you are. They believe I am, I said. They think I am the caregiver, the sketcher. Good. Nora picked up the non-compete clause. She read it, then read it again, her head tilted. Harold is good. I will give him that. Any affiliated Day family member, barred from engaging in any form of commercial or high-end residential development. It is an iron box. He's locking you out of your own profession in your own city. But the waiver, I said, pushing the other document toward her. Nora read the waiver. The silence stretched, a slow smile, the one that earned her the nickname, spread across her face. Oh, Harold, you arrogant, brilliant fool. You built a perfect trap, but you also built the release mechanism. She stood up, pacing the length of her window. This non-compete is contingent on your status. It applies to personnel, partners, and heirs. That is the legal trinity of affiliation with Day Urban Group. By signing this waiver, by accepting this $50,000 payment, you are legally attesting that you are none of those things. I am severing the affiliation, I said, the strategy beginning to form. You are vaporizing it, Nora corrected. Once you sign this, you are no longer an heir apparent. You are not an employee. You are, in the eyes of the law, a private citizen who has been paid in full for services rendered. This non-compete has no teeth. It cannot bind a ghost. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her eyes sharp. But the sequence is everything. It must be a 2-step plan, clean, undeniable, and perfectly timed. 1. You sign, and you cash that check. The transaction must be completed. We need a digital timestamp, a bank record. You must accept your disinheritance before you are a competitor. 2. You announce, the shareholders' meeting, I said. It is in 3 days. My father and sister are announcing the transfer then. Then we have 2 days to build a competing company, secure your contract, and plan a very public debut. The venue was already chosen. My father, a creature of habit and ego, had booked the main ballroom at the Four Seasons Chicago. He had been holding the annual Doug meeting there for 30 years. He loved the theater of it, the heavy drapes, the crystal chandeliers, the faint smell of old money and beeswax. It was his stage. He loved to perform. He is giving Tessa the crown on his favorite stage. I told Nora, it is theater. He wants the industry to watch him pass the baton. Perfect, Nora said. grabbing a legal pad. The best theater needs a surprise ending. We built the timeline not in days, but in minutes. It was precise. It was cold. 2:55 p.m., I said. My father, Malcolm, begins his keynote. He will talk about his legacy. He will run long. 3:05 p.m., Nora continued. Writing. He calls Tessa to the stage. This is the moment, the applause, the transfer of power. This is when they are at their peak. And 3:07 p.m., I said. That is our moment, not before. We cannot act until she has accepted the role. We have to let the generational transfer complete, just as Harold Lyman planned it. The point of impact, Nora murmured. My first call was to Evan Calder, the CEO of Helix Biosystems. He was ecstatic about the design, but I cut the congratulations short. Evan, I need the original, hard copy contract, I said, my voice low, pacing the sterile confines of the temporary office Nora had secured for us. It needs to be sealed, in an envelope, and I need you and your entire board of directors present in the ballroom at the Four Seasons in 2 days. There was a confused silence. Trinity, T. Day Studio, whatever I am calling you, we are not investors in Doug. Why would my board attend their shareholder meeting? You are not attending as investors, I said. You are attending as witnesses. I have a situation here, a non-compete. I need to establish a very public, very clean timeline. I need the CEO and board of Helix Bio to be present when my new studio is announced. This sounds, Evan paused, complicated and dramatic. It is, I agreed, but my $45 million design, the one you loved, is contingent on this. I need to be free to build it. Will you be there? Another pause. I heard him sigh. Sealed contracts, my entire board. We will be there. Do not make me regret this day. You will not. The next 48 hours were a blur of controlled, focused creation. We were not just planning a reveal. We were incorporating a new entity. Nora secured a temporary war room at the lakefront tower. On the 38th floor, it was a glass box in the sky. Coincidentally, in the same building as her firm's litigation support center, we had access to high-speed printers, secure servers, and paralegals who spoke only in whispers. While Nora filed the articles of incorporation for T. Day Studio, I built the presentation. It was 15 slides. Each one was a bullet. Slides 1 through 5 were the portfolio I had built in the shadows. The boutique hotel in Michigan, the innovation lab in Fulton Market, the small community center, projects I had completed under my anonymous handle while logging my father's medication schedules. Slides 6 through 10 were Helix Bio, the campus, the renderings of the R&D labs integrated with therapeutic gardens, the patient flow diagrams I had obsessed over, the data showing how my design saved $3 million a year in operational costs compared to the Doge proposal. Nora stopped me. You need to register your IP, now. What IP? The name, the logo, the brand? She was typing furiously. What is your tagline? I did not hesitate. Spaces that heal, teams that build. Done, she said, hitting enter. T. Day Studio is now a protected brand. Optics were critical. Tessa would be dressed for a coronation. My father, for his final bow. I could not look like the disgruntled, disinherited daughter. Nora made one call, a stylist, a woman who specialized in dressing female executives for hostile takeovers, arrived an hour later. The brief, I told her, is success, not revenge. It needs to be authoritative. She nodded, measured me with her eyes, and left. She returned with a single outfit, a minimalist black vest, tailored so sharply it looked like armor, a white silk shell, and severe black trousers. It was a uniform. It was the anti-Tessa. Nora made another call, a publicist. Not for a press release, she explained. For verification. I want a known, independent fact-checker in that room when they accuse you of theft, and they will. This person will be validating your timeline to the press corps in real time. The final pieces were the logistics of the message. A single courier is a single point of failure, Nora said. He could get stuck in traffic. He could get lost. So we hire two, I said. From two different services, redundancy. Offset by 90 seconds, she confirmed. Courier A has the primary package. Courier B has the duplicate. If A is compromised, B moves. I prepared the guest list. Evan Calder and the Helix Bio Board were confirmed. I added 3 more names, a senior real estate reporter from the Chicago Business Journal, and 2 of the most respected general contractors in the city, men who had worked with my father for decades and who had, in the past, praised my sketches. They would be my independent witnesses. Finally, the letter, the physical declaration. I did not just print 1 copy, I printed 3 originals on heavy, watermarked paper. I signed each one with a wet ink signature. The letter was formal, cold, and final. It was a legal statement. It confirmed my receipt of the $50,000. It confirmed my resignation from all family duties. And it announced the formal launch of Taihish Day Studio and its acquisition of the Helix Bio MedTech campus. Nora insisted on the final touch. She placed each letter in a heavy envelope and sealed it with dark red wax, stamped with the new, temporary seal of her law firm. It looked like a state document. As she prepared the package for Courier A, I took a black fountain pen. On the back of the envelope, the part my father would see just before he broke the seal, I wrote a single line, a postscript. P.S. I suggest you trawl Helix Bio before continuing your speech. Nax looked at my handwriting. The razor-sharp smile returned. And that, she said, is the kill shot. The day of the meeting, I went to the Edgewater house. It was the last time I would go as a caregiver. The routine was an anchor, a series of small physical tasks that kept the tremor from my hands. I entered with the key they thought I would always have. Malcolm Day was in his study, dressed, shaved, and sitting in his high-backed leather chair as if it were a throne. He looked recovered, but I knew the recovery was cosmetic. I knew the fatigue that hit him at 2 p.m. I knew the specific way his signature wavered when his blood pressure was high. I did not say good morning, I said. Time for your reading. I wrapped the nylon cuff around his bicep. The hiss and pump of the monitor was the only sound. I watched the gauge. 135/90. High. He was agitated, excited. Stable, I lied, and recorded a lower number in the logbook I had kept for 3 years. I laid out the pills, the beta blocker, the statin, the blood thinner. He took them from my hand without looking. Tessa is in the dining room, he said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. She's finalizing the media packets. She has that international mindset. Trinity, she sees the big picture. Doug needs to be global. I capped my pen. I was just the help. That 50,000, he said, gesturing to the empty air. It is a good, clean start for you. It will give you the freedom to, you know. To what? I asked, my back to him, packing the monitor. To doodle, to sketch. You were always good at your little drawings. This way, you have a cushion. You do not have to worry about the business. I am not worried about the business. I am worried about your liabilities. Tessa entered. She did not knock. She was wearing a red dress that was too loud for the morning. She was holding a large, empty banker's box, which she dropped onto the desk. Trinity, she said, her voice bright and brittle. Now that the transition is official, I will need everything. Everything? The keys to the locked filing cabinets, the passwords for the vendor portals you were monitoring, the client files you were helping with, she smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. We just cannot have any confusion about authority. She was worried I would linger. She was worried the partners would still call me. I looked at her. I thought of an email chain I had in an encrypted folder. It was from 11 months ago. A plumbing contractor, furious. His invoice adjusted by 15% after the work was completed. Tessa's reply. We are recalibrating vendor partnerships based on new efficiencies. She had been skimming, not just from him, but from 3 others. It was not a new efficiency, it was theft. It was a pattern of behavior that created massive liability. I had found the emails, I had saved them. Nora and I had agreed. That was not the weapon. It was too messy, too petty. It was a domestic dispute. The Helix Bio contract was a professional execution. I will have the keys and passwords sent to your office by the end of the day, I said. Her smile faltered. She had expected a fight. She had expected tears. She did not know what to do with my compliance. I left them in the study, 2 monarchs admiring their small inherited map. I drove straight to the lakefront tower, to the 38th floor. The smell of stale coffee and laser printer ozone was the smell of my real life. I spent an hour reviewing the Helix Bio concept. This was not a doodle. This was a $45 million machine for healing. I went through the deck one last time. The design was built on light and flow. Natural light, channeled through atriums, angled to minimize glare on research screens, therapeutic gardens on the terraces, not as an afterthought, but as integrated components of physical therapy. The real innovation was the patient flow. I had spent 3 years in hospitals. I knew their flaws. I knew the stress of a shared corridor. My design separated the flows. A researcher never used the same hallway as a recovering patient. A visitor never crossed the path of a clinical trial. It reduced contamination, noise, and stress. I clicked to the quantitative slides, the timeline of my freelance work, the cost savings I had delivered, the awards I had won before I became the help. I stopped at slide 10. It was a single, grainy photograph, a gray collapsible hospital chair, the kind they leave for visitors. The caption, 43 nights, schematic design, Fulton Innovation Lab, completed. I had slept in that chair, my laptop balanced on my knees, while my father slept in a bed 10 feet away. The final comparison slide was stark. Doug's proposal for the Helix Bio site, which I had seen in my father's files, and T. Day Studios. Doug, lead gold. T. Day Studio, lead platinum. Doug, 150 projected jobs. T. Day Studio, 212 projected jobs. Doug, standard layout. T. Day Studio, patented patient flow system. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan Calder. Board confirmed. We are on the guest list. No mention of Doug. See you on the other side. Day. At 11:45 a.m., Nora arrived with a notary public. She set up a small tripod, positioning her phone to record. This is a legal proceeding, she said, her voice formal. State your name. Trinity Ann Day. Are you signing this document, the full and final waiver of all claims to the Day Urban Group, of your own free will? I am. Do you understand that by accepting the payment of $50,000, you are severing all financial ties, all inheritance claims, and all affiliations, effective immediately? I do. Nora pushed the document forward. I picked up the pen. I signed the name my mother gave me. The notary leaned in, stamped the page with a heavy, embossed seal, and signed his own name. Nora stopped the recording. Time, she said, showing me the screen. 11:53 a.m. I took out my own phone and opened the banking app. I deposited the $50,000 check. The transaction was instantaneous. The severance was complete. I was no longer an heir. I was no longer affiliated. I was an architect. Nora bundled the signed documents. While she finalized the courier packages, I pulled a single piece of heavy cream-colored stationery from my bag. It was my mother's. She had loved cherry blossoms. I wrote one sentence, Mom. I chose my profession, and I chose myself. I folded it and put it in my wallet. That evening, I could not stay in the hotel room. I drove. I found myself driving past the Dougie headquarters on Wacker. The lights on the top floor were blazing. My father's office. He was there, practicing his speech. The speech where he would anoint Tessa and dismiss me with a check. I drove until I hit the lakefront. I parked near the Adler Planetarium and walked to the water's edge. The wind off Lake Michigan was a physical force, cold and sharp. It stole my breath. I stood there, the city skyline glittering like a circuit board, the black water churning. I was terrified. I was free. I closed my eyes and did the breathing exercise my therapist had taught me. In for 4 seconds, hold for 7, exhale for 8. I did it until the shaking in my hands stopped. I pulled out my phone. 2 more emails to send. Encrypted. Anonymous. To the 2 contractors who had seen my early work and told me I was better than my father. The subject: a note on the future of Chicago development. 4 Seasons. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. I hit send. The script for tomorrow was written. Every minute was accounted for. But standing there, with the wind cutting through my coat, I wondered about the epilogue. I asked the black water, "Is forgiveness in the script?" The lake gave no answer. I left the question blank. I walked back to my car. It was time to get some sleep. The ballroom at the 4 Seasons was my father's preferred coliseum. It was a cavern of beige carpets and crystal, and it was filled to capacity. 200 people. The air conditioning was high, but the scent of nervous money and strong coffee was higher. At the front, the stage was draped in the dudgy corporate colors, charcoal gray and a metallic, aggressive gold. The backdrop was a 10-foot-high repetition of the Day Urban Group logo. This was not a meeting. It was a coronation. I was sitting in the back, in the last row, near the audio-visual table. I had requested this seat. I was, as I had been for 3 years, invisible. I was logistics. I was the help. My laptop bag was at my feet. A single, thin HDMI cable was already plugged into the wall junction box, a cable the AV tech thought was a backup for the main presentation. I watched the clock on my phone, 2:40 p.m. My father, Malcolm Day, was working the room. He was not the man I had given pills to this morning. He was the Titan. He was wearing a new suit, his posture erect, his voice booming as he greeted investors. He was performing recovered. He was shaking hands, laughing, dominating the space. He looked as if the stroke had never happened. I knew his blood pressure was a ticking bomb. Tessa was beside him, a swirl of champagne-colored satin. She was luminous. She was an Instagram post waiting to happen, her smile bright and brittle, her hand already reaching for her phone, no doubt to check the drafts of her CEO-era loading announcements. She was high on the validation she had craved her entire life. At 2:52 p.m., the main doors at the back of the ballroom opened quietly. Evan Calder, CEO of Helix Biosystems, entered. He was not alone. He was flanked by his 3 board directors. They were 4 men in dark, conservative suits. They carried thin, sealed briefcases. They were not investors. They were not press. They looked like an execution squad. As planned, they took seats in the row directly across the aisle from me. They did not speak. They did not look around. They simply waited. Across the room, I spotted my other guests, the 2 general contractors I had invited, looking confused as to why they were here, and the senior real estate reporter from the Business Journal. At 2:55 p.m. precisely, the lights dimmed. A single, harsh spotlight hit the podium. My father walked onto the stage, not a tremor in his step. The applause was thunderous, a wave of noise that he absorbed like energy. He gripped the lectern. 60 years, he began, his voice amplified, the slight slur from his stroke completely masked by adrenaline and a carefully calibrated microphone. 60 years ago, I bought my first 3 flat with my own hands. Today, Day Urban Group defines the Chicago skyline. He was masterful. He was a shark, and this was his ocean. He talked about vision, about strength, about the future. For 8 minutes, he held them captive, reminding them who built this city. I watched the clock, 3:02 p.m. But a legacy is not built in steel, he said, his voice softening. It is built in blood. It is time for a new generation, a new vision. It is time for the international perspective that Doug needs to conquer the next decade. Tessa was beaming, her eyes wet with tears of victory. Please join me in welcoming the new Chief Executive Officer of Day Urban Group, my daughter, Tessa Day. 3:03 p.m. The room exploded. The spotlight swung to Tessa. She glided onto the stage, the satin dress shimmering. She hugged my father. The cameras flashed. It was the perfect photograph, the prodigal daughter, anointed. The applause was just beginning to taper. Tessa was approaching the podium, her prepared speech in her hand. 3:04 p.m. As planned, the side door near the stage opened. A man in a crisp, professional courier uniform entered. He walked quickly. He was not running, but he was moving with purpose. He held a single, heavy, wax-sealed envelope. He walked past the front row. He walked directly to the steps of the stage. He did not look at Tessa. He looked at Malcolm. "Mr. Malcolm Day?" The courier's voice was loud in the quieting room. Tessa froze. My father turned, his face a mask of annoyance at this breach of his script. "I have an urgent delivery," the courier said. "It requires your signature. Now." He held up a digital scanner. The room was murmuring. This was not on the program. My father, always needing to be the one in control, waved off the hotel security who were beginning to move. He would handle this. He strode over. He scribbled his name on the scanner. The courier handed him the heavy envelope. The courier turned, walked off the stage, and exited the ballroom. His job was done. My father looked at the envelope. It was from Nora's firm. He saw the postscript I had written on the back. P.S. I suggest you trawl Helix Bio before continuing your speech. His brow furrowed. He thought it was a threat, a legal maneuver. He tore the wax seal, an act of impatient aggression. Tessa, oblivious, stepped to the microphone. The spotlight was hers. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you, Father. Thank you to the board. I see a future for Doug that is integrated, a future that is digital." I watched my father. I watched his face as he read the letter. It was a 10-second education in deconstruction. Second 1, confusion. He read the salutation. Second 3, annoyance. He read the line about the $50,000. Second 5, pure unfiltered shock. He hit the line announcing Day Studio. Second 7, incredulity. He read the name Helix Bio. He knew that name. He knew it was the $45 million project Doug had been courting, the one he had failed to land. Second 10. He looked up, his eyes, the sharp, assessing eyes of a predator, scanned the dark room. He was hunting. He was looking for me. He found me. I did not look away. I just sat there, in the back row. Tessa was still talking, lost in her own script. "We are already in talks with new, exciting partners, digital health partners, software innovators who will revolutionize our spaces." My father's lavalier microphone, pinned to his lapel, was high fidelity. It was designed to pick up a whisper. He looked down at the paper, at my signature. He whispered, a hoarse, confused sound, to himself. "Helix Bio. They chose me. They did not choose the company. They chose me." The audio system was perfect. The whisper carried through every speaker in the ballroom, echoing slightly. "Chose me. Chose me." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. 200 people stopped breathing. Tessa stopped, mid-sentence. Her smile was frozen, a rictus of confusion. What? Every head in the room, a synchronized, predatory movement, swiveled from the confused daughter to the pale father. In that vacuum, I stood up. My chair made a scraping sound on the polished floor. It was the only sound in the universe. My father's head snapped toward the sound. "Trinity," he breathed. The microphone amplified his disbelieving exhale. Tessa turned, her face a mask of complete, utter confusion. "Trinity? What are you doing? Sit down. You are embarrassing yourself." Mr. Day, a new voice called out, calm and authoritative. Evan Calder stood up. His 3 board members stood with him. I believe there has been a misunderstanding. He walked to the center aisle. He was not addressing Tessa or Malcolm. He was addressing the room. My name is Evan Calder. I am the CEO of Helix Biosystems, and we are not a software company. We are a biotechnology and medical research firm. The dam broke. The reporters in the front row flipped open their laptops. The click-clack of their keys was the new sound in the room. Tessa, realizing her narrative was disintegrating, lashed out at the only target she understood. You, she shrieked, pointing at me. This is what you do. You doodle. This is some personal sketching. You were helping. I did not speak. I walked the 10 feet to the AV table. I picked up the HDMI cable. What are you doing? Tessa demanded. I plugged the cable into my laptop. The Dougie logo on the massive screen behind my father and sister vanished. It was replaced by the first slide of my presentation, a clean white screen, a minimalist, sharp logo, T Day Studio, and my name, Trinity Day, AIA, my American Institute of Architects license number. I clicked, the next slide, my Master of Architecture, Yale. I clicked, the next, the Burnham Prize for Emergent Design, 2021. My credentials, my license, my awards, not doodles, not help, undeniable, professional facts. Tessa stared at the screen, her mouth open, the word software dead on her lips. My father just stared at me. The letter was crushed in his left hand. The reporters were typing. They were not typing about Tessa. They were not typing about Malcolm's legacy. They were typing about the name on the screen. I picked up the small, wireless slide clicker from the AV table. I did not walk to the stage. I stood my ground, in the aisle, in the center of the room. I was not asking for their attention. I was taking it. My name is Trinity Day, I said, my voice quiet but carried by the same perfectly calibrated microphone system. And this is T Day Studio. Our philosophy is simple: architecture that heals, and operations that are sustainable. The first slide of my credentials was still burning on the screen. I clicked. For the last 2 years, I have been building a portfolio. Slide 2, a rendering of a small glass and cedar boutique hotel on the Michigan shore. Project 1, The Heron, 40 keys. We achieved a 92% occupancy rate in 6 months by integrating the design with the local wetlands, not destroying them. The KPI was profitability. We hit it in the first quarter. I clicked. Slide 3, a sleek, repurposed warehouse. Project 2, the Fulton Innovation Lab, a retrofit for a tech incubator. The client's KPI was talent retention. My design focused on modular work pods and air quality. Their retention went up 30%. I clicked. Slide 4, a community center in a low-income neighborhood. Project 3, the Riverside Community Hub. My fee was pro bono. The KPI was engagement. The shared use spaces I designed are now booked 6 months in advance. My father was white. The letter was still a wad of paper in his fist. Tessa looked like she had been struck. I clicked. Slide 5. This brings me to the project my sister was referencing, the one she mistook for a software company. Slide 6. The screen was filled with a stunning, multi-layered rendering of a sprawling campus. It was not a building. It was an ecosystem. Glass, green roofs, and light. This is the Helix Bio-Medtech campus, 500,000 square feet. It is designed to achieve LEED Platinum status. Not just gold, its core innovation is a complete, segregated flow system, separating R&D personnel from recovering patients, a design born from 3 years of watching hospitals fail at this. I clicked. Slide 7, a wall of hard data. This design will create an estimated 212 permanent jobs in this city. My operational flow analysis guarantees Helix Bio a minimum of $3 million in operational savings per year, every year, for the life of the building. I clicked. Slide 8, the kill shot, a side-by-side comparison, my design versus the one Doug had submitted. The T-Day Studio proposal, I said, pointing to the left, versus the Day Urban Group proposal. The Dougie side was a gray block, 150 jobs, LEED Gold, a standard, inefficient traffic flow model. Doug's proposal, I said, my voice cold and flat, was not competitive, it was not innovative, and it would have cost the client millions in lost efficiencies. It was, to be frank, lazy. The room was a tomb. The investors were not just listening. They were taking notes. The Business Journal reporter was typing so fast I could hear the keys from where I stood. "Tess," my father started, his voice a low growl. Evan Calder stood up again, cutting him off. "The board of Helix Biosystems," he said, his voice ringing out, "did not just review these proposals. We held a blind competition. The design by T-Day Studio was chosen unanimously. We did not know who T-Day Studio was. We only knew the work was genius. Helix Bio is proud to award this $45 million contract to Miss Trinity Day." Two men near the front stood up, the contractors. One of them, a man named Mike Reardon, who had built my father's first tower, spoke. "I have seen these plans. The modular cleanroom specs are the real thing. She can build this. We can build this." Tessa finally found her voice, a high-pitched, desperate sound. "She stole it. This is insider information. She was in our house. She heard things. This is a breach. Harold, sue her." There is no breach. Nora Keating, the smiling razor, stood up from the front row. She had been there the whole time, watching. "My name is Nora Keating, of the Keating Law Group. I can attest, as can the notary public who witnessed the signature, that Ms. Trinity Day signed a full and final relinquishment of all family ties and inheritance claims at 11:53 a.m. yesterday." She checked her watch. That is 27 hours before she announced the T-Day Studio. She was a private citizen when she signed with Helix Bio. Her non-compete was voided by Mr. Day himself. There is no conflict. There is only a new, very well-funded competitor. The reporter from the Business Journal stood up, his hand raised. "Ms. Day, what are your year one revenue projections for the new studio?" I looked at him. "Based on the Helix Bio contract and the two other projects in our pipeline, we are projecting between $8 and $12 million, depending on completion bonuses." A gasp went through the room. Evan Calder, still standing, added, "For context, everyone, that single Helix Bio project represented a 15% target of Day Urban Group's entire projected revenue for the next fiscal year." The silence was broken by the sound of phones, investors, partners, board members, all pulling out their devices. The stock market ticker app on a screen by the bar showed Doug's pre-market stability. It would not be stable for long. My father's face was a mask of gray fury. He walked to the edge of the stage, away from the microphone, and hissed, "Trinity, in my office. Now, we will speak in private." I looked up at him. I was 10 feet away, but it felt like a mile. "No," I said. My voice was clear. It did not waver. "You chose this stage. Father, you chose this audience for your announcement, so we will finish it here." In the middle of the room, I saw them, 3 of Doug's core team, the head of acquisitions, the chief structural engineer, the head of client relations. They were the ones who had actually kept the lights on. They were the ones who had covered for Tessa for a year. They looked at each other. It was a single, shared glance, and in that glance, I saw their resignation. They were leaving. They were done. The room was no longer silent. It was a chaotic hum of whispers. Phones were out. People were issuing quiet, urgent commands to their brokers. Sell, hold, investigate. I clicked to my final slide. It was just the T-Day Studio logo. "Thank you," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I was speaking to the room now, to the talent, to the investors, to the press. My father built a company that defined this city for 60 years, but its time is over. Starting today, Day Studio is hiring. We are hiring the best. We are looking for people who want to build new things, not just patch up old ones. The chaotic whispers stopped. They were replaced by a new sound. An investor in the third row, a man who managed a massive pension fund, spoke, his voice clear. Tessa, Ms. Day, can you even explain what LEED Platinum means? All eyes turned to the stage, to the woman in the satin dress, who was now, finally, silent. The ballroom cleared out in under 5 minutes. They did not flee. They evaporated, streaming into the hallways, their voices a low, urgent hum, their phones already pressed to their ears. The show was over, and the fallout had begun. I did not plan for what happened next. I had planned the presentation, not the virality. Someone in the front row, an analyst I did not recognize, had been live streaming the entire shareholders' meeting. His phone, angled perfectly, had captured the whole sequence: my father's confidence, the courier's interruption, the tearing of the wax seal, and the 10 seconds of his face deconstructing. The microphone had been so good, it had captured the whisper that ended his reign. They chose me. Within 24 hours, the clip was everywhere. The financial blogs had it, the local news had it. By the end of 48 hours, the clip, titled The Inheritance Letter, had over 1 million views. The comments were brutal. They were not just about the business. They were about the arrogance. The market, which feeds on stability, recoiled from the drama. Day Urban Group was not publicly traded, but its valuation was the bedrock of its credit lines, its insurance bonds, and its joint ventures. By Monday morning, that valuation was in freefall. Lenders were reviewing their exposure. Key subcontractors, the ones who had not been paid on time by Tessa, started placing liens on Dougie properties. Long-term partners, the institutional funds that had backed my father for decades, did not pull their money. They did something far more chilling. They froze all pending decisions, all capital injections, all future projects were indefinitely paused, pending clarification. The Chicago Business Journal reporter, the one I had personally invited, ran the story that set the narrative. It hit the digital front page on Sunday morning. The headline was a masterpiece of brutal accuracy. From caregiver to competitor, how Trinity Day exited her family's legacy and launched a $45 million rival. The article was not a gossip column, it was a business analysis. He printed my credentials, my license number, my Yale degree. He printed the side-by-side comparison of the Dougie proposal versus the Day Studio proposal. He printed Evan Calder's quote. The choice was not personal, it was qualitative. One design was a masterpiece of efficiency, the other was not. Tessa, as I knew she would, tried to fight back with the only weapon she had: public relations. She had a high-priced, aggressive PR firm on a massive retainer, the same one that had crafted her international visionary persona. They drafted a furious response, painting me as an unstable and opportunistic family member who had violated sacred trusts. The statement never went out. On Tuesday morning, Nora received a carbon copy of an email. The PR firm was terminating its contract with Tessa Day and Day Urban Group, effective immediately. The reason, cited in the cold, precise language of a legal letter, was breach of contract, non-payment of invoices for the past 2 quarters. Tessa had been faking it. She had been spending Doug's money on her own image, and the checks had bounced. The press did not even have to dig. The firm, scorned and unpaid, leaked the entire sordid file. The public takedown was complete. She had been publicly fired by her own spin doctors. Then, my own phone began to ring. The new, Clean Tea Day Studio line. The first call was from a developer. Doug had been courting for 6 months. Ms. Day, he said, his voice hesitant. I was in the room on Saturday. I was very impressed by your presentation. We are currently planning a mixed-use residential, I know you said healing spaces, but I was wondering if you would consider. The second call was from a current Doug client. Trinity, we are terminating our exploratory contract with Doug. We want to talk to you about your approach. 3 clients, all in one morning, defected. The most significant call, however, came from Morrison and Lake. They were the institutional fund. They were Doug's 50-50 partner on the massive suburban renewal joint venture, a project worth over $200 million. They were my father's lifeblood. Their message was an email, concise and terrifyingly polite. Dear Ms. Day, we are formally pausing our joint venture with Day Urban Group. We found your presentation on sustainable operations and data-driven design compelling. We would like to schedule a meeting at your earliest convenience to discuss your capabilities. They were not just pausing, they were shopping for a new partner. Inside Doug, the panic was palpable. The minority board members, the ones who had just watched 15% of their annual revenue walk out the door, convened an emergency meeting. Nora's sources told me it lasted for 6 hours. It was not a meeting, it was a war. Someone leaked the result to the press. The board was reconsidering the CEO transition and exploring all legal options to challenge my father's authority. Tessa, desperate, tried to perform her own competence. She agreed to an interview with a local, highly respected real estate podcast. It was a fatal, arrogant mistake. The hosts were not lifestyle journalists. They were policy nerds. One of them asked her a simple, technical question. Tessa, with your new international focus, how do you plan to navigate the city's new, very complex zoning overlay requirements for the riverfront developments? There was a 5-second pause of dead air. The overlay, Tessa finally said, her voice high. Well, that is about curb appeal. It is a critical part of the aesthetic, making sure the sidewalks and the vibe. The host, trying to save her, interjected. You mean the floor area ratio exemptions? Or the public access setbacks? I mean the vibe, Tessa repeated, firmly. By midnight, the meme was born. A screenshot of Tessa's face from the interview, captioned, Zoning Overlay, it's the vibe. She had just proven to the entire industry that she knew nothing about building. While Tessa was becoming a meme, my phone buzzed with a text from Evan Calder. Solid performance, Day, board is impressed. By the way, Phase 2 is officially greenlit. Another $20 million. We will announce when you are ready. I forwarded the text to Nora. Her reply was instant. Good. I just finished a full sweep. They have no legal recourse. You are clean. Harold Lyman knows it. He has not even sent a cease and desist. He knows he'd lose. They are trapped. The final pieces of the Doji collapse were internal. That email chain I had saved, the one where Tessa adjusted the contractor invoices, it suddenly appeared in the inbox of every employee at Doug. The company was in open revolt. At 4 p.m., the first resume landed in my new T-Day studio inbox. It was from Maria, my father's executive assistant for 20 years. The woman Tessa had demoted. The woman who knew where every single body was buried because she had typed the memos. Her cover letter was 2 sentences. Ms. Day, Trinity, I have seen what you are building. I am ready to start immediately. I called her. Maria, I am not hiring an assistant. I know, she said. You need a director of operations. You start tomorrow, I said, with a 20% raise. Maria was just the first. The flood began. Resumes from Doug's best architects. Resumes from their senior engineers. Resumes from competitors. The cover letters all said the same thing, in different ways. The most common phrase, I want to build something that means something. My story, the one the journal had written, was also picked up by non-traditional outlets, patient advocacy groups, the ones I had studied to create the Helix bio design, began sharing the renderings. They did not care about the family drama. They cared about the segregated patient corridors, the natural light, the therapeutic gardens. They saw the work. The press was relentless. They wanted a victory lap. They wanted me to comment on Tessa's vibe. They wanted me to describe the look on my father's face. I issued one statement, via Nora. It was 3 words. Focused on building. I turned off my phone. I walked into the new office space Maria had already secured, and I got to work. It took 4 days for the call to come. 4 days of day. Urban Group's credit lines tightening. Of Morrison and Lake's public silence. And of my father's name being inextricably linked to Tessa's vibe meme. When my new T-Day studio line lit up with his private number, I let it ring twice. This is Trinity Day. A long pause, the sound of static and pride. You need to come to my office, he said. His voice was a rasp, the boom gone. I do not work for you, Malcolm. I said. My voice was calm, not cold. It was the voice I used with a difficult contractor. My schedule is managed by my director of operations. You can call her. A sharp, indrawn breath. He knew Maria had been my first hire. You took her. I hired the best candidate who applied, I said. If you have a business proposal, I can listen now. Otherwise, Maria can find a time. A proposal, he repeated, as if the word was foreign. Yes, the board. We have a proposal. We want you to come back. Come back? Chief Design Officer, he said, the words rushing out, as if he had rehearsed them. Full board seat. We will absorb T-Day Studio. It will be a new division. We are prepared to offer $700,000 a year. I looked out my window from the 38th floor, watching the tiny boats on the lake. He was still playing the king, offering me a gilded cage in his burning castle. He thought his money, was still the point. No, I said. What? Trinity? Listen to me. 700,000. That is more than Harold Lyman makes. It is a real offer. I am not interested in being your chief design officer. Father, I said. The word felt strange. I have my own company. I have my own contracts. Starting with the $45 million one you lost. I have my own future. I decline your offer. I heard him exhale, a sound of profound defeat. He had no more cards to play, except one. A partnership, he said, the words grinding out. A strategic partnership, Day Urban Group and T-Day Studio. I waited. Morrison and Lake, he said, the admission tasting like ash. They paused the $200 million joint venture. They want to meet with you. The market is unstable. We need to show stability. We need your brand. So, there it was. Not a reunion, a rescue. He did not want his daughter. He needed his competitor. A partnership is a complex discussion, I said. My office, he said, a last attempt at command. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. No, I said, simply. My office, Lakefront Tower, 38th floor. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I hung up the phone. He had to ride the elevator up. He had to come to my space. It was the first lesson in the new hierarchy. He arrived at 10 a.m. precisely. He was not alone. He brought Harold Lyman, the family lawyer. He was treating this as a legal negotiation, not a family reconciliation. Smart. I had Nora Keating sitting at my right hand. Maria, my new director of operations, brought in coffee and left. The 4 of us sat around my glass conference table. The skyline of his city splayed out behind me. Malcolm, Harold, I said, nodding. Trinity, Malcolm growled. He looked smaller in my office. This partnership, what are your terms? I pushed a single sheet of paper, a term sheet Nora had drafted at dawn, across the table. They are straightforward, I said, as Harold Lyman put on his reading glasses. 1. This is a project-by-project partnership only. T-Day Studio will never be a subsidiary of Doug. We will operate under a joint venture for specific, pre-approved projects. Nora spoke. That includes a walk-away clause. After the completion of any single project, either party may dissolve the partnership for that pipeline. No long-term entanglement. We are not merging. Harold looked up from the paper, his eyes wide. This is Z2, I continued, cutting him off. Day Studio retains full, final, and absolute creative control. All design, from concept to execution, is ours. Your team handles financing and logistics. My team handles the architecture. There will be no adjustments from your people. My stamp is my stamp. Profit, Malcolm said, his voice flat. A clean 50-50 split of net profit on all joint projects, I said. Our books will be open to you, yours will be open to us. That is unheard of, Harold said. That is the price, Nora countered, smiling that razor smile. We are providing the brand equity, the design, and the market stability Doug has lost. 50-50 is generous. Malcolm looked at the paper. There is a clause here. Personnel conditions. That, I said, my voice losing any warmth, is the Tessa clause. It is non-negotiable. I leaned forward. Tessa Day will have no operational role, no title, and no contact with any joint Doug TDS project. She will not be in my meetings. She will not be on my email chains. If you want her to ever return to an executive role within Doug, she must first complete a 2-year accredited MBA program from a top-tier university. After that, she must complete a mandatory 2-year internship at an outside, non-affiliated firm. She will not learn on my dollar. She will not use my projects as her sandbox. You will clean your own house. You cannot, Malcolm began, his face turning red. Dictate my internal staffing. I can, I said, my voice final. Or I can walk, and you can explain to Morrison and Lake why the partnership fell through. Your board already knows these terms. They are waiting for your signature. He was trapped. The Doug board, desperate to stop the bleeding, had already capitulated. He was just the last to know. One final term, I said. Communication. This is a business-only relationship. We will not be having family dinners. We will not be blurring lines. The family drama ends. We communicate through Maria, or we communicate through Nora. We are partners, not family. Malcolm slumped. The fight was gone. He looked at the sheet, a broken man. One thing, he rallied, one last spark of the old Titan. A joint press release. We must announce the partnership together, co-branded, Doug and Day Studio, to show the market we are a united front. No. He looked up, stunned. No, Trinity, it shows strength. It helps us both. It helps you, I corrected. It shows Doug using my new brand as a shield. I will not co-brand. I will not let you moon song, as they say. You can release your statement. Day Studio will release ours. We are separate. We are partners. We are not an alibi. Nora tapped the last paragraph. And finally, the intellectual property clause. All designs, concepts, and preliminary sketches created by Day Studio, even for joint projects, remain the sole and exclusive property of Day Studio. Doug is forbidden from reusing, adapting, or building any TDS concept without a separate, written, and fully compensated licensing agreement we will be auditing. Harold Lyman took off his glasses. He rubbed his temples. He looked at my father. Malcolm, he said, his voice heavy with defeat. The board was clear. The market is clear. This is the only deal that keeps us solvent. It is a hard deal, but it is the only deal. I slid 2 more files across the table. We will start with 2 pilot projects to test the workflow. Malcolm looked at them, hungry for a lifeline. Which ones? Morrison and Lake? No, I said. The Union Market Hall and the Riverside Clinic. He looked baffled. The community center? The market? Those are small. Pro bono. They are, I agreed. You will not touch Helix Bio. You will not touch the Morrison and Lake deal. Not yet. We will start by building things the city actually needs. You will learn how to work with me, on my terms, with full transparency. Then we can talk about the skyscrapers. Malcolm Day, the man who built the skyline, looked at the term sheet for the community center. He was being forced to do good. Nora, ever prepared, clicked her pen. The master agreement is already drafted. Reflecting these terms, it just needs your signature. She pulled the thick, bound document from her briefcase and placed it in front of him. He stared at it. I brought out the new corporate seal for Day Studio, a heavy red embosser. My father looked at the seal, a brand he had not known existed a week ago. He looked at Nora. He looked at me. He picked up the pen. I heard him exhale, a long, rattling sigh, the sound of 60 years of ego bending to a new reality. He signed his name. Harold Lyman witnessed it. "The agreement is executed," Nora said crisply, gathering the copies. My father stood. I stood. The room was silent. This was the moment that was not in the contract. He did not offer an apology. He offered his hand. I took it. His grip was firm, papery. It was not a father's hand. It was a partner's. It was a business handshake. There was no warmth. There was no hug. It was the establishment of a new order. He and Harold turned to leave. My father paused at the door, his back to me. "Father," I said. He turned, his face wary. "There is one more thing," I said. The coldness in my voice was gone. "It is not in the contract." Harold looked nervous. "Mom's things," I said. "When she died, you put her journals and her sketchbooks in the locked archive, the one in the Edgewater basement. Tessa, she always kept the key." He looked confused. "Her things?" "I want the key," I said, my voice quiet. "The business is done. I have my company. But that part is not Dougie property. That part belongs to me. It is the only inheritance I want. The key to her memory." Malcolm Day looked at me, and for the first time in a decade, I think he saw his wife's daughter. He did not speak. He reached into his trouser pocket, past his main key ring. He pulled out a single, small, tarnished silver key on a worn leather fob. He had carried it with him. He walked back to the table. He did not toss it. He did not slide it. He placed it gently in my open palm. "She always loved your drawings," he whispered, his voice cracking for the first time. "She would have been so proud." He closed my hand around the key. He nodded once, turned, and walked out of my office. I stood by the window, the metal warm in my hand, watching my new partner get into the elevator. 6 months passed. The noise from the shareholders' meeting, the viral clips, the frantic calls, all of it faded, replaced by the quiet, relentless sound of work. The Day Studio office at the Lakefront Tower was no longer a temporary war room. We had to break the lease because we took over the entire other half of the 38th floor. The glass walls, once bare, were now covered in schematics, material samples, and timelines. The loudest sound in the office was no longer Nora Keating's tactical advice. It was the hum of our new, industrial-sized plotters printing blueprints. Last week, Maria, my director of operations, hung our first new award in the lobby. It was the National Prize for Sustainable Design. It was not the Burnham. It was not about emerging potential. It was about finished work. It felt heavier. It was ours. The groundbreaking for the Helix Bio-Medtech campus was not a press event. My father and Tessa were not invited. It was a cold Tuesday morning, and I stood on the muddy, excavated ground with Evan Calder and his board. We wore hard hats and held rolled plans. The first steel beams were being craned into place, angled precisely to catch the winter morning sun, just as I had designed. The foundations for the therapy gardens were already poured. The trenches for the separate rehabilitation pathways, the corridors with no antiseptic smell I had sketched while sitting in a hospital recliner, were finally being laid in concrete. The design itself, the one my father had dismissed as a doodle, began to take on a life of its own. Evan called me, not as a client, but as a colleague. "Trinity, I hope you are ready for the academic circuit," he said, a note of amusement in his voice. "I have 3 universities. I am talking MIT, Northwestern, and Johns Hopkins, all asking to study the Helix Bio model. They want to make your patient flow design a required case study for their graduate architecture and public health programs. He was not just my first client, he was my most effective champion. A week later, a single, forwarded email appeared in my inbox from him. The subject line was simply, Introduction. The body of the email was concise. Trinity, meet 4 friends of mine. They are, respectively, the CEOs of the 4 largest private healthcare systems in the country. They have seen the data from your operational flow projections for my campus. They are waiting for your call. My studio's pipeline for the next 5 years was filled in a single afternoon. Then, the New York Times called. They were not interested in the family drama. They were writing a feature on the new Midwest generation of architects, a group focused on substance over style. The reporter was sharp, and for an hour, we talked about nothing but material sourcing, air quality metrics, and the psychological impact of natural light. The article ran in the Sunday edition. It was a thoughtful, 2,000-word piece about my design philosophy. The reporter, as a matter of course, had called my father for a quote. She was undoubtedly fishing for drama, for a comment on the caregiver-turned-competitor. But Malcolm Day, the partner, was different from Malcolm Day, the father. His quote was precise, it was strategic, and it stunned me. I taught Trinity Day how to read a balance sheet, he said. The quote attributed to him as founder of Doug. She, in turn, taught me that a building's true value is how it serves the people inside it. Her work on light and space is not just innovative, it is essential. I stared at the words, "It is essential." I read them 5 times. It was the first public praise he had ever given my work. It was not a father's love. It was a competitor's and a partner's. Acknowledgement of strength. It was the only compliment he knew how to give. And it was the first one I truly believed. Maria, reading it over my shoulder, simply said, "Well, it is about time." Maria was not the only one who had come over. The 3 core DUG staff members, the head structural engineer, the acquisitions lead, and the senior client relations director, had all resigned from Doug and taken positions at Tia Day's studio. I was blunt in my interviews. I told them, I am offering you a 10% pay cut from your Doug salaries. They all accepted. The engineer, a man named Sal, told me why. Trinity, he said, I spent the last 18 months patching Tessa's mistakes. I was not building. I was just fixing liabilities. You offered me a chance to build Helix Bio. I want to build things that mean something again. To build something that means something became our internal motto. Our joint venture work with Doug was sterile, efficient, and managed entirely through lawyers and Maria. The Union Market Hall, our first pilot project, was underway because Day Studio had full design control. We had made it a model of sustainable reuse. Last week, the city announced that the project had won a $3 million urban revitalization grant. The partnership was, shockingly, working. It was clean because it had no room for anything but the work. Tessa, as stipulated, remained a ghost. She was nowhere near the operations. Then, one evening, an email appeared in my personal inbox. It was from her. The subject line was, Roadmap. The email read, Trinity, I need the roadmap for the MBA and the internship. What schools? What programs? Send me the list so I can start. It was the same old Tessa, a demand, an assumption that I would do the work for her, that I would hand her the keys to compliance. I typed my reply. Tessa, that is your work, not mine. Send me a detailed proposal. I want to see what schools you have researched, why you believe they fill your significant knowledge gaps, and what your specific, measurable goals are. I will review it for compliance with our agreement, but you will do the work. I did not hear back for 3 weeks. That night, a package arrived at my apartment. A courier delivered a heavy wooden box, about the size of a suitcase. There was no note. The return address was my father's home in Edgewater. I opened it. It was the archive, the one from the basement. It was my mother's. He had sent me her journals, I sat on my floor and, for the first time since this all began, I wept. I ran my hand over the leather-bound books. I spent the night reading. They were not diaries, not in the traditional sense. They were sketchbooks, filled with watercolors of light, of flowers, of the way the sun hit the lake in the morning. And in the margins, she wrote her notes. On a sketch of our Edgewater house, Malcolm wants to build, but he forgets to look at the light. He builds for size, not for feeling. On a sketch of me, age 5, drawing on the floor, my daughter has an eye for the light. She sees the shadows. Tucked into the final journal was a single, folded piece of her cream-colored stationery. The note was handwritten in her sharp, architectural script. I had never seen it before. Trinity, never dim yourself to fit someone else's narrow view. The world needs your full brightness. Shine. I closed the book. The $50,000 check had been an insult. The $700,000 job offer had been a trap. This wooden box. This was the inheritance. The work continued. The video from my presentation, the animation of the corridor with no antiseptic smell, was leaked by one of the patient advocacy groups. It went viral, not with investors, but with nurses, doctors, and patients. It was shared with the simple question, why are not all hospitals built this way? In response, Day Studio, flush with capital from the new contracts, established the Day Community Scholarship Fund, a grant for graduate students seeking dual degrees in medicine and architecture. A week later, I received another email from Tessa. It was different, no demands. The subject was Finance 101. The email: I have enrolled in a basic corporate finance class at the University of Chicago Extension. It meets on Tuesday nights. I am attaching the syllabus. This is the first step. I opened the attachment. It was the right class. She had not waited for my approval. She had not asked for my help. She had just started, quietly, persistently. I replied with one word: acknowledged. The next weekend, I took the afternoon off. I drove to the lakefront, to the spot near the planetarium where I had stood in the wind, terrified. Before the meeting, I had a sapling in the back of my car, a Japanese cherry tree. My mother's favorite color had been the pale, ephemeral pink of its blossoms. I found a quiet spot, and I planted it. It was small. Its branches were thin. It would take years to grow. I stood there, looking at the water. I had the key from my father in my pocket. I had my mother's note. I had my company. I thought about forgiveness. I realized I had been asking the wrong question all along. I did not need to forgive them. Forgiveness was a big, messy word that implied forgetting, that implied reintegration. It implied letting them back into the soft, vulnerable parts of my life. I did not choose that. I chose boundaries. I learned, standing there, how to separate forgiveness from reconciliation. I could be a good business partner to my father. I could be a civil, distant sister to Tessa. I could be kind, but I would keep my boundaries. I would never, ever dim myself to fit their view again. The past is not a memory. It is a liability. The first domino fell on a Monday. It was not a phone call or an email. It was a headline on the Chicago Business Journal's website. Catastrophic failure at Doug's completed West Loop Tower. A water main on the 20th floor had burst, flooding 10 floors of commercial space, causing millions in damages, and forcing an emergency evacuation. It was not a new building. It was a project completed 18 months ago, during the peak of Tessa's unsupervised reign. The name of the primary plumbing contractor, the one now facing litigation, was the same name I had seen on the adjusted invoices, the one Tessa had skimmed 15% from, citing efficiencies. The Doug board, which had been simmering in quiet panic, exploded. They did not just demand an internal review, they hired an outside forensic accounting firm. They launched a full hostile audit of the last 3 years of Doug's projects, searching for every adjustment Tessa had made, every corner she had cut, every invoice she had falsified. The board demanded transparency from Malcolm. They demanded a public statement. They demanded a plan. They were met with silence. My father, the Titan, the man who commanded every room, retreated into the Edgewater house. His silence, meant to convey strength and control, was interpreted by the market as the one thing it could not forgive. Guilt. The rumors started. Doug was not just mismanaged. It was insolvent. It was a house of cards. While his world was contracting, mine was expanding. The first call was from Morrison and Lake, the $200 million joint venture partners. They did not call my father. They called me, at the T-Day studio line. Trinity, the managing partner said, his voice clipped and dry. We have, as you know, paused our suburban renewal project. The board has a new proposal. We are severing that project from the Dougie joint venture. We are offering the contract for the suburban hospital rehabilitation, the centerpiece of the project, directly to T-Day Studio. It is yours, if you want it. I looked at the schematics for Helix Bio on my wall. A hospital. They were offering me another hospital. They were not just cutting Doug out. They were replacing my father with me, using my own specialization as the blade. I will review the terms, I said, my voice steady. Please send the file. The second call was from Evan Calder. His voice was the opposite, all sunshine and energy. Trinity, the board is ecstatic. The progress on Phase 1 is ahead of schedule. They are green-lighting Phase 2, effective immediately, the full $65 million commitment. We want to announce it, a big press conference, at the site. We are building the future of medicine, and we want you front and center. That is incredible news, Evan, I said. One more thing. I think it would be a great symbol of Chicago's strength. You know, the new generation and the established one. I want to invite your father to stand on the stage with us, a real passing the torch moment. It is the kind of story the press eats up, Doug and T-Day Studio, together. The air left my lungs. He wanted to put Malcolm Day, the man whose company was currently being audited for catastrophic failure, on the stage of my greatest success. Evan, I said, let me consider the optics on that. I will call you back. I hung up and dialed Nora. Absolutely not, she said, before I even finished the sentence. He is not a partner. Trinity, he is a liability. Evan is a scientist. He does not understand the narrative. Malcolm Day does not want to celebrate you. He wants to borrow your credibility. He wants to borrow your credibility. He wants to stand in your light because his own house is on fire. You let him on that stage. You are not a partner. You are an alibi. You are the shield. Do not let him tarnish your brand. So what do I do? You set the terms, Nora said. You set them so high that only a man who is truly desperate will climb. This is your leverage. Use it. The work, however, continued. My team was in a deep dive design review for the new Morrison and Lake Hospital. We were discussing ADA compliance, specifically the turning radius for advanced mobility chairs in the recovery suites. The room was a mess of blueprints, coffee cups, and focused arguments. My operations director, Maria, buzzed my intercom. Trinity, you have an unscheduled visitor. It is your sister. I muted the conference call. Tessa, here? She is in the lobby, Maria said, her voice flat. She is asking to see you. This was not in the agreement. This was not on the schedule. This was an old Tessa move, a violation of boundaries. I walked out of the conference room. She was standing by the window, looking out at the city. She was not the woman in the champagne satin dress. She was dressed in simple, dark trousers and a plain blouse. She had a textbook under her arm, Corporate Finance 101. She looked small, and for the first time in her life, she looked tired. You are not supposed to be here, Tessa, I said. She turned, flinching, but held her ground. I know. I am sorry. I am not here for Doug. I am here for my class. Your class? My finance professor, she said. He said a name I recognized. He was talking about your interview, the one in the Times. He is using T-Day Studio as a case study in market disruption and first-year capitalization. She looked down. I am failing his class. Trinity, I do not understand the words. She looked back up, and her eyes were not defiant. They were desperate. I know I'm not allowed in business meetings, but I saw you were having a design review. Could I just sit? In the back? I will not speak. I just want to listen. I just want to hear how you talk about the work, how it actually works. I stared at her. This was the woman who had dismissed me, who had tried to end my career, asking to be my student. I thought of my mother's words, never dim yourself. I thought of my own, boundaries, not revenge. Fine, I said. I opened the door to the conference room. My entire team looked up. Everyone, this is Tessa Day. She is here as an observer. I looked at her. You can stay. You will not speak. You will take notes. I pointed to the blueprints. We are on the physical therapy wing. Your assignment is to focus on the pathways for wheelchair access. Note every single place a corner is too tight or a doorway is too narrow. That is all. She nodded, her face pale, and walked to a chair in the corner of the room, far from the main table. She opened a notebook and began to write. The meeting resumed. We worked for another hour. When it was over, my team filed out. Tessa remained, scribbling. I walked over. Her notebook was filled with detailed, frantic notes. The turning radius, she said, not looking up. You gave them an extra 6 inches by the window. Why? Natural light, I said. Recovery is faster when patients can see the sky. The wider turn allows them to park and face the window without blocking the corridor. She just nodded, absorbing it. Thank you, she whispered, and left, clutching her notebook. That night, at 10 p.m., my phone rang. It was my father. Trinity! His voice was not a command. It was a plea. It was the thinnest, most uncertain I had ever heard it. I saw the press advisory for the Helix Bio Phase 2 announcement. Evan called me. He was very gracious. He was, I said. I need to be there, he said, the words tumbling out. Trinity, you do not understand. The audit, the board, Morrison and Lake, if the market sees me on that stage, with you, with Helix Bio, it stops the bleeding. It shows we are stable. It shows we are allied. He wants the shield. Nora's voice echoed in my head. We need to stand together, Trinity, tomorrow. I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. I agree, I said. He sounded stunned. You do? Yes, a unified front is important. I pulled up a file Nora and I had drafted 2 days ago, just in case. I am sending you an email. Father, it should be in your inbox. Now. I heard his computer chime on his end. What is this? Doug TDS? Contractor? Protocol? It is my one condition, I said, my voice hardening. This is not a performance for the press. This is a new, binding, legal standard. If we are allied in transparency. This protocol gives Day Studio, my team, full sign-off on the re-vetting of every single Dougie contractor and vendor. For all projects, past and present, it forces a complete, transparent audit, co-signed by me. Before any new work begins, it is the antidote to Tessa's adjustments. It is the only way to prove to the market, and to me, that Doug is clean. The silence on the line was heavy, thick with 60 years of ego. This, he whispered, is an insult. This is not a partnership. This is a takeover. You are putting me in receivership. I am giving you a lifeline, I said, and I am protecting my own brand. You will not stand on my stage and borrow my credibility while your own is in flames. You will sign this protocol. You will clean your house publicly, with my oversight, or I will see you at Thanksgiving. Those are the terms. He hung up the phone. The next morning, the Helix Bio site was buzzing. We were doing a final, strict rehearsal for the press conference. Evan's team was meticulous. Every word was scripted. Every movement was blocked. There was no room for error. There was no room for an ad-lib. My phone was vibrating in my pocket. The press, smelling the Dougie crisis, was bombarding Maria with requests for my comment on the audit. They were desperate to get my side of the family drama, to get a soundbite of me kicking my father while he was down. I authorized one statement. I gave it to Maria. Our only comment is this, I said. Good leadership is not about never making mistakes. It is about correcting them properly and transparently. The statement was a scalpel. It was professional, but it was aimed directly at the one person who needed to read it. At noon, 1 hour before the press conference, my rehearsal was interrupted by a text. It was from my father. It was not a speech. It was not an argument. It was 4 words. I have signed. See you tomorrow. I took a deep breath. The ego had broken. The dominoes had all fallen into place. That evening, I did not go home. I went to the Helix biosite. The construction crew had just finished installing the main glass panels for the central atrium. The atrium I had sketched in a hospital chair. The massive 3-story glass hall. They had the work lights on, pointing up, and the light was pouring through the glass, down into the lobby, illuminating the bare concrete, making it look like a cathedral. It was a promise, made of light and steel, fulfilled. I went back to my office. I sat at my desk. I opened the bottom drawer. Under a pile of files, I took out a simple, black, disposable pen. It was the pen I had used, months ago, to sign the waiver, the $50,000 letter, the one my father had laughed at. I checked it. It still had ink. I put it in my coat pocket. I would need it tomorrow. The press conference for Helix Bio Phase 2 was held on-site, in the vast, unfinished atrium of the building itself. The winter light streamed through the 3-story glass ceiling, illuminating the raw concrete and exposed steel. It was not a sterile ballroom. It was a cathedral of work in progress, and the acoustics were magnificent. The press was here, but so were the contractors, the engineers, the governor, and the heads of every hospital in the state. Evan Calder, glowing with success, had set a new standard for a project reveal. My father, Malcolm Day, stood in the front row, not on the stage. He looked pale, but he was here. He was wearing a dark, conservative suit, and he looked like a man who had not slept. I saw Tessa in the back, standing near the exit, clutching a leather portfolio to her chest. She was not on the guest list. She had simply shown up, and Maria, my operations director, had let her in. Evan spoke first, outlining the success of Phase 1, the new $20 million injection, and the projected completion date. Then he turned to me. But the real genius here, he said, his voice echoing in the hall, is the architect, the one who saw this not as a building, but as a machine for healing, the founder of T-Day Studio, Trinity Day. The applause was loud, a sharp, rolling sound against the concrete. I walked to the podium. I was not wearing the black armor from the shareholders' meeting. I was in work trousers and a simple blue silk blouse. I was not at war. I was at work. I looked out at the crowd, at the cameras, at my father. "Thank you, Evan," I said, my voice steady. "When I designed this space, I did not have an office on the 38th floor. I had a gray collapsible hospital chair. I sat in that chair for 43 nights, watching my father recover, and I learned what was wrong with the buildings we build. I learned that we build for aesthetics, not for people. We build for efficiency, but not for healing." I pointed up, to the light. I learned that discipline is the only thing that creates true freedom. The discipline to sit in that chair and finish the schematics. The discipline to demand a better standard. This building is not the product of a vision. It is the product of 3 years of relentless, agonizing, focused discipline, from a hospital chair to a $50,000 buyout, to this studio. T-Day Studio is not a new generation. We are the new standard. The applause was different this time. It was quieter, more respectful. I had not given them a soundbite. I had given them the truth. I finished, and Evan returned to the podium. "Thank you, Trinity. A new standard indeed." He then looked to the front row, and the script we had all rehearsed suddenly felt very thin. "And now, I would like to invite up a man who represents the legacy of Chicago development, the founder of Day Urban Group, Malcolm Day. A cold silence fell over the room. The press, who had just read my statement about his mistakes, leaned forward. This was the moment. My father, his face ashen, walked onto the stage. Evan, ever the gracious host, handed him the microphone and a small white note card. Malcolm Day, the titan, the orator, took the microphone. He looked at the note card in his hand. It was his script, the one Nora and I had approved. The 3 sentences of polite, generic praise for the project. He looked at the card. He looked at me. He looked at the cameras. Then, with a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, he did the bravest thing I have ever seen him do. He dropped the note card. It fluttered to the stage, face down. He abandoned the script. He gripped the microphone, and he was not the partner. He was not the titan. He was just a man. "My name is Malcolm Day," he said, his voice a low, rough thing. "And I am not here to talk about legacy." The room held its breath. "I am here," he said, his voice cracking, "to say that I was wrong." A gasp rippled through the press corps. A few months ago, in a room full of my peers, my daughter, Trinity, presented me with a letter. It was a letter that detailed her severance from my family and my company. It detailed a new project she had won, a project I had tried and failed to win. He looked straight at me. And when I read that letter, in front of 200 people, I laughed at her. I laughed at her value. I laughed at her doodles. It was the single greatest, most profound, and most public mistake of my life. The cameras were not just recording, they were absorbing him. "I did not laugh," he continued, "because I was arrogant. I laughed because I was ignorant. I was blind. I had spent so long building a kingdom that I had forgotten how to value the people in it. And that letter, that $50,000 letter, it was not an insult. It was a mirror. It was the only thing that could have shamed me enough to see the truth. That letter, which I humiliated her for, was the one and only thing that saved Day Urban Group from complete, self-inflicted destruction." He paused, taking a ragged breath. "I was building on an illusion. She, Trinity, is building on a standard, and I am here to publicly accept that standard." He turned. Maria, my director of operations, walked onto the stage carrying a thick, bound document and a pen. "Today," Malcolm said, his voice gaining strength, "as my first act of transparency, Day Urban Group is signing a new, binding protocol with Day Studio. It is the Contractor Transparency and Revetting Protocol. It is her standard, and it will be our new law." He took the pen from Maria. The main live stream camera, which Evan's team had set up, zoomed in front of the governor, the press, and the entire industry. My father signed his name to the document that made him accountable to me. He did not just sign it. He initialed every single page. When he finished, he put the pen down. He looked into the audience, at the back of the room, near the exit. He was looking for Tessa. In the shadows, I saw her. She did not shrink. She stood up straight. Slowly, she lifted the leather portfolio she was holding. It was her 2-year academic plan, the one she had submitted to me, the one detailing her path from a Finance 101 night class to an MBA. She held it up, not for him, but for me. A silent, public commitment. She was accepting her own terms. My father nodded. A single, sharp movement. Evan Calder, seeing his moment, stepped back to the microphone. This is the new standard, and in that spirit, Helix Bio is proud to announce a new $5 million research fund, the Designing for Healing Initiative, to be co-chaired by Day Studio. The room exploded. I was no longer a vendor. I was a research partner. The press conference broke. The reporters swarmed me. They swarmed my father. I heard a reporter shout at me, "Trinity! Trinity! Is this sweet revenge?" I stopped. I turned. I looked directly into his camera. "Revenge is a word from a family drama," I said. my voice cold. I am not interested in drama. This is not revenge. This is the standard of business that should have existed from the very beginning. This is just the work. Excuse me. I walked away. The lead contractor, the man who had vouched for me at the shareholders' meeting, intercepted me. He was holding a document. Ms. Day, an honor. We have that chain of community health clinics coming up, a 3-year pipeline. We would like to sign a memorandum of understanding, giving Day Studio priority and right of first refusal on all of it, if you will have us. I took the pen from his hand. I will have you, Mike. Send the MOU to Nora. My father was standing alone, by the stage, as his team, the few that remained, fielded questions. I walked over to him. He looked at me, his eyes clear. He asked for 30 seconds, alone. We stepped behind a concrete pillar, into the quiet. I taught you leverage, he whispered, his voice hoarse. You taught me leverage, I agreed. You, he said, a small, pained smile forming, taught me limits. I looked at my partner, my father. Limits, I said, are what create respect. I held out my hand. He took it. It was not the handshake of a father and daughter. It was not the handshake from Nora's office. It was a new one. It was a handshake between two equals. When we stepped back out, the applause in the room was not for the drama. It was not for the confession. It was for the contract. It was for the standard. It was for the work. I stayed long after everyone had left. I stood in the center of the atrium. The work lights were off, and the late afternoon sun was pouring through the massive glass roof. It was exactly as I had sketched it. The light fell in a perfect, warm rectangle, exactly where the therapy garden would be planted, a symbol of recovery. Maria came up to me, holding a small, metal box. It was the construction time capsule, the one they would seal into the foundation. Anything you want to add, boss? She asked, smiling. I reached into my pocket. I took out the cheap, black, disposable pen, the one I had used to sign the waiver, the one that had started this. I looked at it, the pen that had signed my disinheritance, the pen that my father had laughed at. I dropped it into the box. That is it, I said. I was closing the cycle. I was burying the weapon. The war was over. I left the site. I drove to the lakefront, to the spot near the planetarium. It was cold, but the sky was clear. In the distance, the small sapling I had planted, the cherry tree, was standing against the wind. It was small, but its roots were holding. I stood on the edge of the water, the wind sharp against my face, and I looked back at the city, my city. Mom, I whispered to the wind. I chose myself, and I built something. I built something stronger than any inheritance. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so curious to know where in the world you are listening from. Please let me know in the comments below. Share your thoughts, and let's connect. Subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it a little extra love by hitting that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.